Under the blue moon in the sky, the old castle seems to radiate vitality again. In the luxurious room on the top floor of the castle, under the night, a 17 or 18-year-old boy with a worried look, put his hands on the windowsill, and stared at the square below the castle with a confused expression for a long time. He is not from this world. He has his relatives in the city, friends who can laugh and play together, and even lovers who talk about marriage. It is a pity that he has somehow crossed into this world in an accident, and I am afraid he will never return. Went. I remember as if I had died in an accident, and then I felt like I had passed through a bizarre passage, and when I woke up, I had changed my body. So, in the original world, I was already dead. Dodo. At this moment, there was a knock on the door. The young man immediately put his mind away and walked over to open the door. An old man dressed in neat clothes and full of silver hair was standing respectfully outside the door. "Butler Frey, what's the matter?" The old man called. Frey smiled politely and moved away. Behind him was a maid carrying a food box, and a burst of aroma of food came from the food box. Leo showed a surprised look and asked, "Butler Frey, it's late at night. Is this a supper for me?" Frey showed nostalgia while nodding his head and replied, "Yes, Master Leo." When Master Lane, Master Mengdao and Master Andy were there, they liked to drink a little quail egg stewed mushrooms at this time of the day. "The lady specially order, I have prepared a copy for you, and I will bring it over." The young Leo's expression stiffened slightly, and he paused for a while before responding flatly, "It turned out that it was ordered by Madam." "Well, Butler Frey, you thanked Madam for me. Things, just put them on the table, I can eat it." Butler Frey nodded, instructed the maid to put the food box on the table, and then paused for a while and said, "Master Leo, the day after tomorrow is the funeral of Master Ryan and the others. How have you learned the etiquette?" Rio frowned slightly, and replied helplessly, "The etiquette is okay, but those noble emblems are too many, just a few days, I really can't remember." Frey began to look embarrassed. After a moment of silence, he smiled bitterly and said, "It is indeed embarrassing for you. No one would have thought that the master and the two young masters would suddenly encounter an accident, so that you can learn aristocratic etiquette in a few days and remember it well. The emblem of the nearby family is indeed a bit difficult. I will report this to Madam to see what she can do." Leo nodded silently, watched Frey take the maid away, walked over and slowly closed the door. Did the three males encounter accidents at the same time? I'm afraid not necessarily. When Leo was crossing, the previous Leo was hit by someone and suffered heavy head injuries, and his soul dissipated. In other words, if he hadn't replaced it, the body would now be a corpse. From the memory of inheritance, Baron Ryan was very afraid of his wife, and there was almost no lover in this life. The only few times when he acted on the scene, he only gave birth to Leo by accident, but he never dared to recognize it, but sent someone to give Leo's mother a large sum of money, and never appeared again. In other words, if he hadn't passed through rebirth, the direct male of the Gresk family would have been dead in almost a period of time. This is definitely a conspiracy against the Gresh family. But Leo came back to life without the outsiders knowing it, although his soul was changed. But for the Gresk family, this is great news. At least, the title and territory can be retained. So 3 days ago, Leo, who had just crossed over, was taken to the castle by the Baroness and announced that he would inherit the baronial title and revive the Gresk family. This Baroness, who took an illegitimate child who was struggling with food and clothing to the castle, and helped him to the position of Baron, should she want to listen to the government? Well, this kind of thing is not uncommon. Although Leo was just an ordinary worker before the crossing, he came from the era of information explosion. I have seen a few court dramas, and I guessed the Baroness's plan at a glance. However, he did not want to and did not dare to refuse. Only by staying in the castle can the killer be scrupulous and give him a sense of security. I'm still too fragile. If I have a strong force, I don't have to be afraid of what I want to do, how can I not dare to leave the castle? But who is going to target the Gresk family? Leo thought of this question, and his expression suddenly became cloudy. Originally inherited the title of a baron out of thin air, even if it was emptied, the days were always 10 times better than the original Leo's daily rush to fill his stomach. But the cloud of the assassination was overwhelming, and the title became a bit hot. You must have the power to protect yourself, Leo said viciously to himself in his heart, revealing a look full of desire. Because this is a world with extraordinary power. Knights and warlocks are the only two ways of power in this world. They are similar to warriors and wizards in previous games, but they are very different. But how different is the specifics? Leo, who has been on the verge of food and clothing, is very vague. I heard from the butler that the ancestors of the Gresk family were knights who made outstanding military exploits and were named barons. Then, first find a way to become a knight. Only in this way can self-protection be possible. Otherwise he will never leave the castle. Isn't that imprisonment in disguise? Leo began to wonder where to find the way to become a knight. In this world, it is very difficult for civilians to obtain information about power, so Leo doesn't know much about it. No way, thinking about it, only ask the Baroness to see how her attitude is. In the early hours of the next morning, the castle restaurant. Leo swallowed the last steak, wiped his hands, and looked up at the Baroness. This is a woman who looks like her in her early 30s. She has round eyes, a tall nose, and a blonde hair that hangs down like a waterfall, blocking her exposed snow-white neck. She has a very beautiful appearance. She is now wearing a pure black palace costume, her eyes are out of focus, her expression is numb and cutting the steak mechanically. It looks like the death of the Baron and his 2 sons hit her hard. Leo stared at the Baroness for a second, and this thought suddenly flashed in his mind. Soon after Leo looked at her, the Baroness suddenly raised her head, her eyes regained clarity, and asked with a hint of doubt, "Leo, you have been looking at me for a long time. Come on, what's the matter?" Leo didn't expect her to feel so keen. He looked around at the servants who were serving the meal, hesitated, and decided to ask the secret behind the Baron's death for the time being. He can only say, "The Baroness. Call me Mrs. Lane. Tomorrow after breakfast, I will assist you in completing the oath. At the funeral, Earl Padding should send someone to him, and you will hand over the oath to him, which should be considered as the completion of the ceremony of inheriting the Baron. I will hand over the ledgers, guards, and some secrets of the castle into your hands." The Baroness said very slowly, as if she had planned for it long ago, not on a temporary basis. Mrs. Lane stopped suddenly, turned her head to look at Leo, squinted and said, "Of course. Not to mention that the ancestor who established the Gresk family was a powerful knight. Even if Lane, he was already a man at the end of the adventure. He is an official knight. Although it took him a lot of time to deal with territorial matters later, he has already reached the extreme knight after so many years, and he can be promoted to the great knight with only a piece of luck. After I have said this, do you think he is at home? Will there not be some knight skills?" Speaking of Ryan's ability to break through the great knight, her eyes dimmed again, and she sighed and smiled bitterly. Perhaps, if Ryan works harder, he may have already been promoted to the great knight. Then this crisis, maybe he can defeat the assassin with his own strength and get rid of this bad luck. Having said that, Leo hesitated for a while, gritted his teeth and asked, "Madam, do you know who the assassin was who killed Lord Baron? Why did he kill Lord Baron? And still want him to be cut off? The blood is severed? Have you ever met an assassin?" Mrs. Lane immediately noticed the terrifying meaning of Leo's words, her face was shocked, and she gritted her teeth and asked. Leo thought for a while, and showed Mrs. Lane the wound that was not covered by the hair. Because of the mysterious healing of this fatal wound, even he himself was confused and could not explain it at all. He can only nodded and said, "I did encounter an assassin. I was lucky enough to escape." But if the lady didn't summon me back to the castle, I'm afraid I'm dead now. Damn it! I know it's not that simple. How did he let go of the last blood of the Gresh family? Mrs. Lane suddenly punched the wall of the secret room, her eyes flashed with hatred, and the lady's temperament disappeared. Seeing this scene, Leo suddenly recalled. She seemed to have said that she and the Baron met during an adventure career. In this way, the Lady Lane is not just as simple as the Baroness. But immediately Leo noticed the meaning of her words and asked loudly, "Madam, who is he that you are talking about? Do you know who murdered Lord Ryan?" Mrs. Lane slowly calmed down, turned her head and stared at Leo for a while, shook her head and said frustratedly, "Do you want to avenge your father? Don't think about it. His power is far greater than you think, with the help of a little baron. It is impossible for the forces to find him revenge unless, assassination." Assassination? Leo couldn't help but his eyes widened. Does this mean to return the person's body in the same way as the person? Mrs. Lane didn't explain much, her tone changed, and she said thoughtfully, "But if I change my mind and tell you, you can be careful to guard against him in the future, so as not to stupidly crash into his territory. And I may be here. When you die soon, you won't even know who killed your father and enemy. Leo, remember, he is Count Cecil. Earl Cecil." Leo couldn't help but muttered silently a few times, and a strange feeling surged in his heart. There is no doubt that in the days to come, the shadow of this Count Cecil will hang over his head and will pose a huge threat to him. But on the other hand, he could be reborn because the assassin sent by the Earl beat the original Leo to death. Mrs. Lane misunderstood Leo, thinking he wanted revenge, and solemnly said, "Don't think about revenge. Leo, you have to know that the Gresk family is just an unremarkable family of barons under Earl Padding, and the Cecil family, his power is even higher than that of the Payton family, and the two are incomparable. Therefore, there is no way to get revenge by normal means. Only assassination can make him pay the price he should pay. Okay, you don't have to worry about this. Do what you should do." Leo was silent. Being murdered but helpless, this kind of feeling is really uncomfortable, but who calls the other party an earl? Soon he became puzzled, frowning, and asked, "How can the Gresk family be qualified to be remembered by an earl? The gap between the two sides is so big, as long as he sends an army, he can crush the Gresk family's guard with one click. But, right? Why does he only use this very inefficient means of assassination?" Mrs. Lane hesitated for a moment, and finally replied, "This is the biggest secret, don't tell others for the time being. Because, a few years ago, a high-quality magic iron ore was discovered in the family territory, and the scale is not small. I don't know how. The news was learned by Count Cecil. In order to seize this magic iron ore, Cecil racked his brains and used various shady methods, but he did not dare to be blatant. After all, the Gresk family is the territory of Count Payton. Alas, speaking of which, this mine has swallowed the lives of Ryan and my 2 children. I don't want the Gresk family to be destroyed. Of course, I don't want the Cecil family to gain an amazing fortune. You read www.uuganshu. SOCOM intends to dedicate the magic iron ore to the Patton family in your name, in exchange for some benefits. When tomorrow, the people of the Patton family come, and you successfully inherit the title, secretly give the magic iron ore to the Patton family right. As for the return of the Payton family, you can decide. You can ask for a change of territory or something. Magi sight?" Leo was shocked at the same time showing a look of sorrow. In the memory he acquired, he once heard the blacksmith say that a caddy of magic iron ore costs more than 10 gold coins. It is an important material for forging magic weapons and is of extremely high value. An entire vein, the value is simply amazing. Such a piece of fat in the hands of a baron would indeed cause disaster. You are right, such a thing should really be offered. Leo did not give up, but with a trace of fear, he nodded in agreement. Mrs. Ryan stared at Leo closely, and after a long time, she said with a complicated expression, "You did not hesitate to give up such a huge fortune. It's really amazing." Even Ryan and the others, after a few hesitations, were still reluctant to bear it. It is this great fortune that has led to a huge disaster. Leo, you may become a great person. Really? Madam, you overwhelmed. Leo was a little embarrassed to praise. In fact, where is he willing to give up such a huge wealth? Just because I have just crossed, I still have an understanding of the concept of gold coins. Just like a person who is greedy for money has just arrived in a new country, he must first be cautious and skeptical when he comes into contact with a new currency. Mrs. Lane did not think of this at all, and coldly added at this time, "As for revenge, I will do it myself. As a wife who has lost her husband and a mother who has lost 2 children, my future life is only for revenge. Existence. And your mission, as long as you pass on the Gresk family steadily and don't let down your father Ryan's expectations, that's enough." The secondary Windbird secret medicine is to use 1 Windbird crystal marrow for every dozens to 100 secret medicines, which is suitable for the preparation knights of ordinary physique and will not explode and die. The official first level Windbird secret medicine contains more than 10 Windbird crystal marrows in 100, and no more than 1 secret medicine contains 1 crystal marrow, depending on the strength can be increased or decreased. Generally, knights use less for elementary or intermediate level, and more for advanced level. When they reach superior or extreme level, they usually take the most effective secret medicine that contains a Windbird crystal marrow in a secret medicine. As for the blast bird, this is a second-level alien animal, and the secret medicine refined from the blast bird crystal marrow can only be taken by the Great Knight. Although it's not as good as the Grisk family's knight skills that can be cultivated to the third-level knights, it is not bad. Moreover, the Windbird series is known for its speed, and its strength is not bad at the same level. Ao murmured, guessing in his heart that directly swallowing the crystal marrow should have nothing to do with the practice of knighthood, which made him want to try it out impatiently. Let him make a choice. Another point is that for more than 100 years in the Gresk family, apart from the genius ancestor, no one of the descendants can cultivate to the rank of strong knight, or even to the rank of great knight. There are very few. So in case it feels wrong, it is not unacceptable to be promoted to the second-level knight. Moreover, it also mentioned that the knight method can be modified, but the original knight method needs to be completely abolished, and it takes about a year to purify the body, which is a bit expensive. After a final consideration, Leo took the Windbird crystal marrow and swallowed it without hesitation. As the crystal marrow swallowed, Leo slowly felt a cold breath spread from his abdomen. He couldn't help but shudder, and he hadn't figured out whether to cover a quilt. The breath eroded Leo's body all at once, reaching his brain. At that moment, Leo felt a violent pain surging throughout his body, as if there were hundreds of millions of knives stirring in his body, trying to stir every inch of his flesh and bones into a pulp. Leo fainted without a grunt when he received this severe pain that exceeded his tolerance for the first time. "Master Leo? Master Leo!" In the dim, I heard the voice of the close-maid Adele. Leo rubbed his eyes and looked over, with the concerned little face in front of him. "It's here? Ah, when is it now? How long have I been in a coma?" Leo suddenly remembered the coma, remembered the important funeral, suddenly woke up, and quickly asked. Seeing Leo awake, Adele was obviously relieved, and quickly replied, "It is almost noon now. You should have slept for 3 or 4 hours. Madam asked me to tell you to go to lunch, and at the same time she asked me to tell you, Viscount Pam. He has arrived early and is talking to his wife. He is a good friend of Lord Lane and a classmate of the Knights Academy when he is alive, and he is a trustworthy person." Viscount Pam. Leo was shocked. Just about to say something, he suddenly felt warm and comfortable in his body. His face changed, he looked at himself, and unexpectedly found that he was not wearing any clothes and was soaking in the tub. Adele saw Leo's thoughts and quickly explained, Master Leo, I opened the door and came in. I found that you were fainted on the ground with a very smelly dirt on the surface of your body. So he decided to help you take off your clothes and hug you in the bath. Bucket, bring warm water to wash away the dirt. A layer of dirt? Only then did Leo recall the experience of taking crystal marrow and passing out unconsciously, and immediately began to close his eyes and examine himself. Is very strange. He easily entered a mysterious place and saw a flying bird inside. Wind bird? Impossible. I just swallowed one crystal marrow. Every alien beast has many bones in it, and each bone contains a different number of crystal marrows. How can one crystal marrow be transformed? A wind bird? Wait, what's the situation with the wind bird? The cavaliers never mentioned this situation. Leo couldn't understand it at all, his face showed an unexpected look. The practice of the night method is to slowly strengthen the body through secret medicine and secret method, breaking through the limit to gain combat power. Leo has never seen any description of the mysterious space in several night methods, let alone the situation of transforming an alien beast. Is it because of the ability that my special mutation brings? Leo's heart moved, and he had some guesses. In fact, if you think about it carefully, you can swallow the crystal marrow whole, as if you have never heard of such a thing. It seems that it really belongs to its own reasons, and it can be regarded as a certain kind of special talent. But what is the use? Leo sat in the warm water, and couldn't wait to call that wind bird in his heart. But the weird thing was that the wind bird didn't respond, and didn't pay attention to Leo at all. He tried to bump, touch, chant and sing with his own consciousness, and all other methods he could think of, but the wind bird didn't respond at all. Where is the problem? Leo was puzzled. He faintly felt that this strange ability was very useful, but couldn't find a way to use him. In desperation, he could only sigh, and read www.yuyuganshu.com to wait for later. Master, Madam wants you to go there quickly, or I will help you put on your clothes. Okay, but... Leo was a little embarrassed. He was just an ordinary person in his previous life and didn't like to go to that kind of place. He was taken to the castle not long after he arrived in this world, his mentality had not yet changed, and he looked at Adele with a little embarrassment. But Adele didn't even know Rio's embarrassment. In other words, in her opinion, serving the young master to bathe is justified, so what's the problem? So she heard Leo agree, turned around happily, took the bath towel, helped Leo up, and started to wipe his body with the bath towel. Well, Adele, should I come? Or you can call a valet to come over. Leo flushed, and said with a bit of embarrassment. Adele was taken aback for a moment, and his expression immediately panicked, and said in a panic, Master, why, do you think I serve badly? That's not true, I just think. It's kind of weird to let a woman serve me in the bath. Adele did not expect this to be the reason. He sighed with relief. At the same time, he realized the reason for Leo's performance. He wiped his face and blushed and said, Master Leo, you are not a nobleman before, and you may not know the personal maid. Isn't it my job? I don't need to wash and cook, and I don't need to grow flowers or plants. My only job is to serve you well. Not to mention bathing, even if it is. Well, my job is all about it anyway. Leo was not stupid. He quickly understood what Adele hadn't said. He coughed awkwardly and pretended not to understand, but he could only let Adele wipe him clean and put on his clothes. Walk to the restaurant. Regarding this beautiful little maid, he has no idea for the time being because he has all his mind on dealing with the assassination. Madam, please forgive me for being late. Also, Uncle Pam, my name is Leo. It's the first time I met, so please give me some advice. Leo walked into the restaurant and saw Mrs. Lane dining with a middle-aged man with a pair of mustaches. He immediately followed the noble etiquette and said what he had prepared on the road. The bearded man looked at Leo, smiled and nodded, and said approvingly, "Leo, you are very good. The etiquette is very standard and very aristocratic. Soon, you will inherit the title of the Gresk family. I hope you can fulfilling Ryan's wish to make the Gresk family more brilliant." "Thank you, Uncle Pamphlet," Leo responded, and sat down at the sign of Mrs. Lane, and the three began to eat and talk. The funeral itself will only invite some well-connected nobles, the others are relatives, and a few friends whom the Lanes met during their adventures. Only out of the assassin's consideration, Leo never met with these people. The friends that the Lions met during the adventure are nothing more, but those relatives of Baron Lyons. If Leo dies, although they are not eligible to inherit the title, they can definitely be assigned to many properties of the Gresk family. Especially the two younger brothers of Baron Ryan. Once Leo dies, they will gain a lot, so Mrs. Ryan has never let Leo meet with them, which naturally has a deep sense of defense. "Madam, Leo's situation is not optimistic." After chatting for a while, Pam and Leo gradually became familiar with each other. In addition, they had a very good relationship with Ryan before they were alive. The Cecil family seems to use the Gresk family to offend them as an excuse to pressure the Patton family and demand compensation for the Gresk family's territory. Mrs. Lane sneered, but did not say anything else, but asked Pam, "Dear Pam, your territory is the closest to Patton's house. Do you know who came from this funeral?" Viscount Pam thought for a while, and replied with some doubts, "I heard that Miss Hathaway came. I just heard that because I didn't pay too much attention, and the news was a bit surprising, so I was not very sure. After all, the General Baron had an accident. The Patton's family will only send a lower-ranking direct line, not an important person like her. It turned out to be Miss Hathaway." Mrs. Lane's eyes lit up, and Leo looked at each other, and she couldn't help showing a surprised look. Hathaway is the eldest daughter of the patriarch of the Patton family, and the most amazing of several children. She was not valued by the Patton family at first, and she was sent to study at the most famous Azure Knight Academy in the Principality at the age of 10, and she was regarded as expatriate. But no one thought that it took this girl from the Patton family for 12 years to grow from a weak girl to a great knight, and it is said that she is not yet a junior great knight. After graduating and returning to the Patton family, she didn't even think about marriage at all, and pursued the way of chivalry. You must know that she is only 22 years old at this time. The entire earlship believes that Hathaway will become a strong knight in the future, and it is very likely that Hathaway will become a strong champion knight after decades of hard work. This led to the embarrassment of the few boys who had always been valued by the Patton family, and even the patriarch of the Patton family began to blur their attitude. After returning from Hathaway, he never mentioned the words of letting the eldest son inherit the title. Instead, in fact, he handed Hathaway to deal with many important events in the territory. The implications are worth pondering. You know, although this is a world where boys are patriarchal, it is even more powerful. Weak women become family patriarchs, grand princes, and even kings. This ridiculous thing has never happened. However, powerful women surpassed their brothers and sisters of the same generation, becoming family patriarchs, female grand dukes, and female kings. They are everywhere in history, and there has even been a female emperor. Therefore, the Patton family sending people like Hathaway this time is definitely not just to attend the funeral of the next Baron. Undoubtedly, from the death of Ryan and his son to the abnormal behavior of the Cecil family, the Patton family felt a trace of abnormality, and then Hathaway was sent. This is better. The appearance of Miss Hathaway will make the funeral of Ryan and the children more decent. Mrs. Ryan gave a long sigh of relief and did not reveal the magic iron or matter in advance, but concluded in a grateful tone. Although Pam was still a little confused, he didn't ask too much. Instead, he turned his head and chatted with Leo about the youthful years that he had spent in the Knights Academy with Baron Ryan. His words were full of nostalgia. Reading www. By the way, he mentioned a lot of common sense about knight training, including the rank of knight that Leo wanted to know. Ordinary people just start to practice, and they are all considered preparation knights. This is the beginning of the road of knights. Then there is the official knight, belonging to the first level, and the strength is similar to that of the first level alien beast or alien. Then there are the second level knights and the third level strong knights. By the third level strong knight, in the common duchy, he can already be regarded as a very good strong man. If he serves for the princes and gains military exploits, he has the possibility of being knighted. If 1 to 3 levels belong to the low rank of knights, then the 4th to 6th ranks are the middle ranks of the road of knights. At the 4th tier champion knights, they are all big names on the side of Megatron in the Principality, and there are only a dozen people in the Virgin Principality where Ryan is located. The 5th level is called the Glory Knight. Legend has it in the Viking Principality, but Pam has only heard that, he has never seen it. As for the Bright Knights of the 6th level, no one knows whether it exists in the Principality, at least Pam hasn't heard of it. As for levels 7, 8, and 9, according to Viscount Pam, the 7th level is called the Nightmare Knight, also known as the Eternal Nightmare, which means that it will bring an indelible nightmare to the enemy. The 8th level is called the Calamity Knight, destroying calamity, which means that once it is shot, it will bring a devastating calamity to the place where it is. The most terrifying is the 9th level Catastrophe Knight, also known as the Final Catastrophe. It is said that a single blow will bring the world into apocalyptic catastrophe. Of course, this is an exaggeration, but they can guess their strength. Pam once heard from a college teacher mentioned that in the human world, above the nobles and royal families is a council called the Council of Disasters, which is not responsible for specific affairs, but once an order is issued, it is aimed at all mankind, all principalities, kingdoms and empires must abide by. And the warlocks on the other road of human beings are said to be of the same rank, except that the word knight in the back is replaced by warlock. When the lunch was over, Leo deeply felt that a knight born in an academy like Viscount Pam had extraordinary knowledge. He felt that he had gained a lot and he also had some ideas for the future. It's a pity that both the Knights Academy and the Warlock Tower only recruited aristocratic teenagers under 12 years old with decent talents, or ordinary youths with extremely outstanding talents. Leo was already too old. Forget it, it doesn't matter if you haven't entered the academy. Leo couldn't eat grapes, so he could only muttered bitterly, and watched Baron Pam walk to the guest room. Then he turned his head and said to Mrs. Lane, "Mrs., I am very interested in Feng'aniao, don't know if there is Feng'aniao crystal marrow at home." Mrs. Ryan glanced at Leo with a strange look, and nodded and replied, "One of the 5 boxes is filled with crystals. It is used to cultivate some talented soldiers. You can go and find it yourself. Except for the important things on the shelf, other things are now up to you. When you inherit the title tomorrow in front of Miss Hathaway, all those things on the shelf will belong to you." While speaking, Mrs. Lane suddenly understood something, her face was slightly stiff, and she said embarrassingly, "You asked me because the secret room had to pass through my bedroom. Haha, there is no other way. The ancestors of the Gresk family, this is how I designed the castle, and I can't change it. But don't worry, after the funeral, I will leave soon. Then you can move the bedroom over and it will be very convenient to get in and out of the secret room. This time, you will go there by yourself. Right? Go away? Is she going to take revenge?" Leo wanted to stay, but then realized that it was impossible, so he nodded silently and walked to the secret room. The 5 boxes in the secret room were of different sizes, and Leo opened them all. One of them had a pile of gold coins, one had many exquisite jewels, one had several exquisite weapons and armors, one had many crystals, and the last box was the largest, filled with piles of magic iron ingots. It is indeed the family who discovered the magic iron ore. I am afraid that the value here is enough to buy a few barons. Earl Cecil will find the magic iron ore of the Gresk family, it will not be the Greeksy family. Secretly the iron ore was transported to the Cecil family territory for sale, and it was only discovered, right? Leo swallowed, guessing secretly. But for the time being, he didn't have the mentality to know about it. He just covered the other 4 boxes, rummaged for a while in the box containing the crystal marrow, and picked out all those with the windbird crystal marrow. There are 300 of stars. It's just that each piece of Feng'aniao crystal marrow is at most the size of a broad bean, and a few hundred pieces are actually a small bag as big as a palm. With this peritectic marrow, Leo left the secret room and returned to his room, immediately swallowing the windbird crystal marrow again. The funeral will be tomorrow, and he still has time. This time swallowing the Feng'aniao crystal marrow, it feels completely different. The feeling of smashing the flesh and stirring the blood plasma did not reappear, and naturally there was no pain that went beyond the limit. It was just an icy breath pouring out of his abdomen, and then weirdly all the way up, endlessly pouring into Leo's mind. To be precise, it flooded into the strange Feng'aniao in his mind. When the icy breath produced by a windbird crystal was completely exhausted, the weird windbird became a little clearer. Is this charging? Or perfect? Leo couldn't figure out the situation, thought for a moment, then gritted his teeth and swallowed a windbird crystal marrow again. In this way, Leo swallowed windbird crystal marrow one by one, swallowing a full 135. Suddenly the hollow eyes of windbird in his mind suddenly lit up, and the whole feeling was like a machine. Agile, with vitality in general. It's done. Leo was inexplicably surprised, and tried to summon the windbird. Immediately he felt that the windbird disappeared in his mind, and a strange power emerged from all over his body, which made him secretly guess. Hat! Leo let out a low cry without warning, and hit the wall of the room with a punch. But unexpectedly, a sharp pain came from his hands, and he immediately gritted his teeth and retracted his fists, and his brows wrinkled deeply. Did I guess wrong and didn't get the power of the windbird? Rio was a little unwilling. Thinking back again, suddenly his eyes lit up. This punch is not much different in strength than before, but the speed seems to be a lot faster. Suddenly he had a second guess in his mind, and he hurried to pick up the windbird night technique, turned to the page about windbird, and examined it carefully. It is recorded in that the windbird is a small bird with wind attributes. It is about the size of 2 fists in adulthood. 2 fists? This is big among birds. Leo muttered, and then looked at it carefully. The adult windbird is a first-class alien beast, but apart from the physique of the first-class alien beast, it has no strong killing ability and only eats some plant fruits and insects. But as a strange beast, Feng'aniao certainly has a kind of natural ability. Its natural ability is speed, and it is also ranked in the top ranks among the first-level monsters. This is what it relies on to avoid predators. Windbirds are found in various places, and their feather colors are different. According to the place of origin and feather color, they can be subdivided into green windbirds, red windbirds, or Ceci windbirds, Logia windbirds, and so on. Leo didn't feel in the mood to look anymore. He slowly put down the book, his eyes flashed, and he looked at the other side of the room. Leo's room is one of the most luxurious bedrooms in the castle, and naturally one of the largest. According to his estimation, the entire room is no more than 300 square meters. Except for the bed, cabinets, and some decorations, there is not much, and it looks very empty. From one end of the room to the other, it was more than 10 meters, enough for him to test. Whether the guess is right, it depends on this time. Leo thought to himself, his body suddenly accelerated. An afterimage flashed past, and Leo had already appeared on the other side of the room more than 10 meters away. Hey! The room is too small, and how many times the speed has been increased can't be tested, but at least several times are still there. A deep tiredness emerged, but it could not conceal the ecstasy in Leo's heart. Smart, he has figured out the usefulness of his weird ability. By swallowing the crystal marrow of the alien beast, he can condense the illusion of this alien beast in his mind. When the number of crystal marrows swallowed is large enough, the alien beast illusion will live, and then activate the illusion. Leo can directly obtain the innate ability of this alien beast. However, compared with slowly practicing the Windbird Night method, this method has achieved Windbird's natural ability at one time, but the physical fitness has not changed, and it is still an ordinary person. And slowly practicing the Windbird Night technique, not only can slowly gain the Windbird's talent, but also the physical fitness will gradually improve. The more important thing is to reach the rank of Knight, and get Knight-specific combat power, which is equivalent to the unique ability of the beast power in most alien beasts. The key to the problem now is, by swallowing the crystal marrow, how many abilities can I have at most? Also, if I can only have one, is this ability fixed or replaceable? The ability of one type of Windbird is good, but if you can possess the talent abilities of multiple alien beasts, who would dislike it? And Leo knew that among the high-level monsters, there were countless faster than the Windbird. If the Windbird ability cannot be replaced, at a certain height, this ability will be dispensable. To know the answer, Leo immediately thought of the 4 remaining crystal marrows of different types. When he picked up the 4 crystals, his face suddenly became very ugly. The feeling of extremely longing when I saw the crystal marrow disappeared. In his eyes, these 4 different types of crystal marrow faintly exudes an unpleasant stench, and he has no desire to swallow it at all. From this point of view, it seems impossible to obtain several alien talents. Even replacements seem to be hopeless. Leo was full of disappointment. But it is obviously not his character to give up like this. After picking slightly, Leo selected a small night crow crystal marrow, endured the stench and swallowed it in one mouthful. 1 minute passed, no abnormalities. 5 minutes passed and there was no abnormality. 10 minutes later, there is still no abnormality. That night crow crystal marrow was like an ordinary stone that was swallowed by mistake, with no response at all. Leo shook his head disappointedly, and his mood fell instantly. There is only one type, and it cannot be replaced. In this case, this ability has little potential. Just when he was frustrated, he accidentally saw the remaining Windbird crystals. Leo was stunned for a while, before suddenly regaining his senses. He realized that he still had the desire to swallow the essence of these Windbirds. Although it is not as strong as before, at least it is not disgusting. Could it be that if you keep swallowing the Windbird crystal marrow, you can increase your talent level? Leo couldn't help but guess, walked over to pick up the remaining Windbird crystal marrow, and started to swallow it without hesitation. There are about 200 essences in the bag. Leo swallowed the first crystal, originally expecting to increase his talent level. But unexpectedly, a second one appeared below the original phantom of the first Windbird. A move in his heart dissipated the power in his body, and the first Windbird appeared in his mind again. Hey, this one emits silver light? The position in the mind space is also much lower. I don't know what is the difference between this second Windbird and the first one, what powers it will have. Leo was curious. He tried to summon the silver Windbird in the same way, but there was no response. Oh, right, I swallowed a crystal marrow, it hasn't come back to life yet. Leo patted his forehead and cursed himself confused. Then he began to swallow one by one, until the 136th, suddenly the silver Windbird in his mind also changed and lived. At the same time, he found that he had completely lost interest in those Windbird crystals. In other words, he can only have at most one golden Windbird and one silver Windbird. Activate! Leo gave a low cry, and then nothing happened. How is this possible? Is this silver Windbird a waste? He frowned for a while, tried it with unreliable methods such as chanting and chanting, all of which were useless. Try the original golden Windbird again. The first Windbird was higher, still shrouded in a faint golden light. Leo simply called it the golden Windbird. This time it was different. There was no need to chant or chant at all. As long as the thought moved, the golden windbird disappeared from the space of his mind, and then the cold acceleration talent appeared in Leo. Leo tried it. The action is still surprisingly fast, but at the same time, the physical exertion is also very huge. With the stamina of ordinary people in Rio, he soon became a little bit overwhelmed, and put away the golden wind bird. It doesn't seem to be a matter of method. So, is it? Leo quickly got an idea, walked over to open the door, and told the little maid outside, Adele, go to Butler Frey and let him help you find a live cat, and then send it to me. Adele agreed and went hurriedly. Soon after, a live domestic cat arrived in Leo's hands. Leo closed the door, thought for a while and closed all the windows, then let go of the kitten's hand. The kitten, who was not familiar with Leo, escaped Leo's claws for the first time and jumped to a cabinet to watch Leo vigilantly. Now, let's try the speed first. Leo smiled slightly, activated the windbird talent, and then strung out in one step. The kitten saw only an afterimage, and was so scared that he stood on its back and wanted to escape, but a palm had appeared on the back of its neck and lifted it up. The speed is so fast, reading www.yuyugonshu.com is too expensive. With my physical strength, it is estimated that I will move at this speed a few more times. I am afraid I will get tired and get down. Leo panted heavily and began to try various methods to activate the silver wind bird. This time there was no need for Leo to do anything. The thought just appeared, and the silver wind bird disappeared suddenly. The kitten in his hand suddenly let out a scream, struggling frantically. About an hour later, the cat slowly stopped screaming and fell silent. Leo prayed silently in his heart and let go of his hand holding the back of his neck. A faint afterimage flashed by, and the kitten disappeared from sight. Fast speed. Leo's guess was confirmed, and he couldn't help feeling ecstatic. This silver windbird is really similar to the golden windbird, except that the silver windbird is blessed by other creatures. Unlike the golden windbird that needs to consume Rio's physical strength to maintain it, the silver windbird seems to consume the physical strength of the kitten, which is good news. The key now is whether it can be recovered and used on an ordinary kitten, which is simply a waste. Leo stood in place. Although the kitten was hiding out of sight, Leo suddenly could clearly feel its position and even its emotions. Fear, and hatred. It seems that the pain caused by the silver windbird fusion just now makes it very bad for Leo. Since I am afraid, then I will try to take it back. Leo tried hard to recall the feeling of taking back the golden windbird. With the thought, another screaming scream came from the kitten hiding behind the cabinet. Different from the length of 1 full hour before, this time the scream lasted less than a minute, and then the silver windbird suddenly came back to his mind, and the kitten behind the cabinet made only a few weak calls. Leo moved away from the cabinet and found that the originally nimble kitten described as withered, skinny and unable to move, as if his body had been hollowed out. His eyes flashed, he gently lifted the unresisting kitten up, opened the door and gave it to Adele, and at the same time he asked, "You will take care of this kitten yourself, provide it with delicious food, and then, report to me about it every other day." Adele took the miserably mistreated kitten with a weird look, and agreed with some fear. Although Leo could see her fear, he didn't care. At the moment, his mind was full of strange thoughts. I have the windbird talent myself, it is of no use, because I am just an ordinary person now, at most allowing me to have the same speed as the first windbird, but because my physical strength can't keep up, I can't move in a few strokes. But what if this talent is blessed on an official night? More interesting thing is that I can withdraw this talent at any time, and it can also make the person who loses the talent temporarily lose strength due to drastic changes in the body. This can also be used as a kind of control means. Leo thought divergent, thinking of the use of the silver windbird. In the current situation, the silver windbird is far more useful than the golden windbird for the time being. With this idea, where is the most urgent task to find a loyal subordinate with official knight strength? This kind of character is not a cat or a dog. Even if he is about to inherit the baronship, it is not a problem to find a few reserve knights, but it is a bit too difficult to find a loyal man with the strength of a formal knight. Leo thought left and right, completely clueless, and finally felt that this matter had to go to Mrs. Lane. It happened that he had been tossing for a long time, and it was getting dark now, and it was almost time for dinner. Sure enough, Adele told him to go to the restaurant for dinner soon, and Leo hurried away. At dinner, Mrs. Lane was still sitting on the main seat and Leo and Viscount Pam were sitting on both sides. As for the other people, for Leo's safety, they were all arranged in the restaurant on the first floor of the castle. The time was also staggered, and they would not appear here. Today's dinner is obviously much richer than lunch. In addition to the common lamb meat, steak, and some vegetables and fruits, it also served the famous local wine fish, fried golden ants, Fijian fruit wine, and the main course is very precious. The meat of an alien white bear. The raw materials for this dish alone are sold at a market price of more than 10 silver coins per catty, and there are at least 5 catties of white bear meat on the table, which are made into deep-fried steaks and stewed meats with sauces. Pam, I was in a rush at noon, and the kitchen was not prepared. At night, I must taste the craftsmanship of the castle chef. Mrs. Lane said with a smile. Viscount Pam is obviously very familiar with Mrs. Lane. After thanking gracefully, he skillfully scooped up a spoonful of fried golden ants with a spoon and slowly chewed it in his mouth. With a satisfied smile on his face, he sighed, "Grace on the territory, this golden ant is the most delicious. Every time I think about it, it makes my mouth water." Mrs. Lane laughed, shrugged, and said, "I just know that Pam you like it, so the farmers in the territory caught some. Unfortunately, these golden ants are not many, and they can only be provided for some people to taste by chance, or else you can add some income to the territory." Pam said while tasting the delicious food, "Tina, what you said is pretty good, she is more and more able to manage the territory. It seems that after Leo inherits the title, your help is still indispensable." Tina? It turned out that Mrs. Lane's name was Tina. At this time, Mrs. Lane smiled and said, "After Leo inherits the title, I will not stay here. Pam, if you have anything to do with Leo in the future, please help. If you are not embarrassed, I hope you can help him." Viscount Pam showed a thoughtful look, frowned and looked at Mrs. Lane and asked, "Do you want revenge for Lane and the others?" Mrs. Lane poured herself a glass of fruit wine in silence, drank it all, and then slowly said, "Glory, hatred, love, there are always things in the world that we can't let go. Pam, I heard Lane once said, back then, for your beloved Elsa, you almost broke up with your family, and even preferred to give up inheriting the title for her. If it weren't for..." "Enough, madam. I don't want to mention that sad thing again." Viscount Pam's eyes flashed with great pain, and he interrupted Mrs. Lane with a sigh. "He still looks elegant, but at the moment he is holding the knife and fork in his hands, and the blue veins on the back of his hand are bulging, which looks terrible. I'm sorry, Pam, I shouldn't mention your sadness." Mrs. Lane apologized immediately, and instead of talking about the topic just now, they had a casual discussion about the many viscounts and baron forces under Count Peyton. This was actually told to Leo in secret, so that he could better understand the character he was about to face. Until the end of the dinner, Viscount Pam left and returned to the guest room. Reading www.yuyugonshu.com. Rio finally found the opportunity and asked, "Madam, you will leave after I inherit the title, right? Then, how should I lead me territory?" Mrs. Lane nodded slightly and said, "I have made arrangements for this matter, but since you ask, I will tell you. Butler Frey will take care of the castle affairs for you. Their family has followed the Gresk family for generations. No one is a butler, and there is no doubt about his loyalty and ability. If there is no major change, I suggest you continue to use him. There are about 100 troops in the territory, and Bernard will help you manage it temporarily. He is an official knight, born a civilian, and graduated from the Knights Academy with Ryan. He has better talent than Ryan, and he is one of the few people willing to follow Ryan at the beginning. Is also a friend of Ryan. I guess that his strength should be about to break through the Great Knight, right? I don't know much about him. Ryan communicates with him. You can figure it out. In addition, there are 3 deputy stewards who help Frey with the various territorial affairs. They are Ender, Kenner, and Sean. There is also an official knight named Andrew in the army who was promoted a year ago. Ryan was one of the 10 reserve knights trained in the army during his lifetime. His talent is very outstanding. This young boy's family are civilians in the territory and are very loyal to the Gresk family. And his own talent is very outstanding. Ryan once said that if he was sent to the Cavalier Academy, he is a genius who may become a great knight before the age of 30. Leo's eyes lit up. A genius boy, loyal to the territory, isn't this the person he is looking for? Immediately he stopped hesitating and said to Mrs. Lane, "Madam, can I call this young man now and let him be loyal to me?" "Why? After tomorrow, you can justify becoming a baron, why bother for a while?" Mrs. Lane's eyes were full of doubt. "Madam, I have a bad premonition. In fact, if you think about it, you can guess that Earl Cecil will definitely not let me succeed, and something will hinder me. And I doubt his goal is me. So I want a strong knight for personal protection. The Bernard knight is naturally better, but he is a good friend of his father. I think this Andrew knight is more suitable." Mrs. Lane was lost in thought, and after a while she nodded slowly and said, "Although I don't believe it, this time Miss Hathaway will come, the Cecil family will be messed up. But just in case," I agreed. "Andrew is a good guy, his physique is soil type, and he is practicing the bull knight method among the 5 knight methods I have shown you. This native knight method is only 1 level, and some of his talents are wasted. You will have a chance in the future. If you get the Earth Spirit Orb, you can try to help him change his knightly." Leo agreed without hesitation. In fact, treasures like Earth Spirit Orbs are too difficult to obtain. After considering whether to wait for himself to be promoted to knight, he asked Andrew to abolish his cultivation base and rebuild a stronger knighthood. Mrs. Lane nodded, not paying attention. Even she couldn't get a treasure like Earth Spirit Ball, she just mentioned it casually. She called Butler Frey and asked him to inform Andrew to come over. About a few minutes later, a burly man with a height of nearly 2 meters walked in. Wearing a full set of heavy plate armor, he held a huge hammer in his right hand, and a huge steel shield in his left hand, with 5 javelins stuck behind his back, and walked straight towards Mrs. Lane. When he stepped on the ground made a creaking sound, as if he could not bear his huge weight. Mrs. Lane took advantage of the time Andrew had not yet approached, and whispered, "Andrew is born with great strength, and he can lift hundreds of kilograms of wood down the mountain without practicing." Later, Lane specially selected him who is known for his strength. The Cow Knight's power is even more terrifying, even Bernard dare not confront him head-on. His armor was built for him by Ryan, spent dozens of gold coins. The whole set of armor is 100 caddies, plus a shield and weapons. It's almost 200 caddies. But he usually wears on his body except when he sleeps, and doesn't feel tired at all. Alas, it's a pity that his speed is too slow, every time he loses to Bernard in speed. If he can go up at a speed, I doubt that he can fight against Bernard. Leo listened to Mrs. Lane's words, his eyes brightened. This is simply the best gift from God. What will happen to a knight with a short speed and a silver-winged bird with a rapid increase in speed? Leo was looking forward to it more and more. Andrew walked up to Mrs. Lane, knelt down on one knee, and muttered, "Madam, Andrew is here. I don't know what you call me." Mrs. Lane glanced at Andrew, then pointed to Leo and said, "Andrew, this is Master Leo. Tomorrow, Leo will become the new Baron. But I am worried that something unknown will happen, so from now on, you will be loyal to Master Leo and protect him personally." "Something unknown?" Andrew guessed something, his face burst into anger, and he said loudly, "Madam, are these assassins? Great, as long as they dare to come, I will use my brute force hammer to knock their heads open and avenge Lord Baron." Mrs. Lane smiled bitterly and pointed at Leo. Andrew then reacted and immediately knelt down to Leo and said loudly, "Andrew has seen Master Leo. Your will is my mission." Leo pondered for a while, and felt that he would help Andrew to fuse the silver winged bird. If something happens tomorrow, it is impossible for Mrs. Lane to discover the abnormality. That way she might feel that she has something to hide from her, and feel uncomfortable. Now everything about Leo can be said to have been contributed by her, so let's avoid this happening. With such an idea, Leo pondered for a moment, strode to Andrew, put his hand on his shoulder, and asked loudly, "Andrew, are you sincerely willing to be loyal to me?" "Yes, Master Leo." Andrew lowered his head and answered without hesitation. Leo nodded in satisfaction and asked again, "Then if I want to make a contract for you, once I die of injury, you will die immediately. Will you agree?" Andrew answered without hesitation again, "Master Leo, I am willing." "This is such a straightforward big man." Leo nodded with satisfaction and said, "Then, take off the armor on your chest, and I will make a contract for you." Mrs. Lane slowly felt weird, but she didn't stop it, but watched it curiously. Andrew did not hesitate, took off the helmet, and then took off the heavy plate armor. Leo stretched out his hand, and Andrew was kneeling almost as tall as him. Reading www.yuyuganshu.com is therefore easy to press on his heart. After the contract is established, you will be very painful for a while. "Andrew, can you bear it?" Leo asked again. Andrew couldn't help grinning after hearing this, and replied confidently, "Master Leo can't stand a little bit of pain even if he does it, how can he become a powerful knight?" Leo was very satisfied, and said, "Be happy, don't resist." This is because he was afraid that the official knight would be able to resist. He specifically said something, then closed his eyes and mobilized the silver winged bird, and injected it according to the previous method. Andrew's body. Soon Leo opened his eyes and saw Andrew gritted his teeth and resisted the pain. Now he was relieved, indicating that the integration was underway. "Leo, what did you do to him?" Andrew is a famous Iron Man. Before he became a knight, he had been injured many times in the battle to destroy the bandits in the territory, but he never frowned. Now his expression shows how much he has suffered. "It's painful?" Mrs. Lane asked suspiciously with her chin in one hand. "Is about the biggest secret, Leo naturally wouldn't tell the truth. Fortunately, he had already had an excuse and used the plot in the bard's story to deal with it and said, "Madam, this is when I was a child I got a mysterious contract mark, which can be given to a servant who is loyal to me. The above said that after the contract is signed, you can increase the speed of the servants. I think this is too suitable for Andrew, so I gave it a try." "There is such a thing? You didn't lie to me, did you? I'm an adventurer, how come I have never heard of this kind of contract?" Mrs. Lane was full of disbelief. "It's just that she is not an enemy after all, she is just wondering, and will not think badly." Leo looked at Mrs. Lane and shrugged and couldn't continue to explain. It is really troublesome to make up an excuse in front of a well-informed person.